So good evening for everyone. My name is Jakub Hurta, and I'm from the webinar team, and I'm from the Czech Republic. And I'm happy that you are with us tonight for another general audience webinar today about events and how do you create an event with impact with Evi Rodemann. And I'm happy that we can have Evi with us for tonight. And thank you so much that you will spend this evening with us. And for you who don't know Evi, Evi has been involved in creating events for young people and churches locally, nationally, and on the European level since she was a teenager. Events have always played a vital part in her own walk with God, but she also seen how they bring Christians together and mobilize them for a missional lifestyle. She studied missions in the Netherlands and worked in India, Africa, and Hong Kong, but her strongest passion remains Europe and helping its young people to find their kingdom role and to live missionally wherever God calls them. So so again, thank you, Evi, that you are with us for tonight. And I will just say some technical information before we start. So this webinar is being recorded. So if you lose the internet connection or anything happens, you will get the recording and the slides, the presentation by email. So you can get back. You can watch it again or send it to someone. And if you have any problems with connecting to the webinars, or you have any questions, you can send me a message here through the chat box, or you can send me an email, and I will be happy to help you. And if you, for example, have a problem with your internet connection, you can connect through your phone, or yeah. So I hope we can solve it so you can be with us. And if you have any questions, please tell us. And there are two ways you can again type it as we did the introduction to the chat box, or you can type it to a Q&A section that you have accessible to. And then at the end of the webinar, there will be a Q&A part where you will be able to unmute yourself. And if you want to say, for example, the question or a comment out loud. So this should be the technical information, and I would now like to ask Evi to start her presentation. So Evi, please.
Thank you very much. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you, Jakub, for hosting us, and delighted to meet you here. Though I hate not seeing faces from you guys. Because I'm such a people person, probably like most event organizers. I'm just thriving on people, so not seeing you guys is always a bit hard, but I hope we're gonna have a good time here, and for the next hour and a half, just spend some time together on events and impact and learning together what is out there. And I always do these things also for selfish motivation, to be honest, because I love to learn also from others. I love to learn from people who have, who are doing great events, who have such an impact, even, in their region, maybe in their nation or whatever. Sometimes, through doing these, I get some amazing articles, sometimes, various studies of countries. And so if you tonight, you think like, oh, well, there's something in English or German or Dutch, whatever, I can only read these three languages. And you say, oh, maybe Evi can profit from this, then please share with me. Let me just, start with a prayer, because when we talk about event and impact, then I think finally it is God who's giving us the ultimate impact or not. And I'm also always a bit like, wow, a bit nervous. How is this going to go and be perceived? So let me just pray for us. Lord, thank you so much for the opportunity tonight to meet here online. Thank you for these precious people who have set aside some time to learn, to engage about events. Lord, I pray that something profitable will be in there for each of us, that we use that also to reflect our own events, or as one of them is starting events in our church and business, Lord, help us to just be a learning community for some time here together, and that whatever also the technical stuff and so on all will work out fine. So I pray, God, that you guide me with my words and help me to make things clear. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. So yes, there's a chat box. So if there's some of you have already said, where you're from, the country, and I always love it. The variety in Europe is just so beautiful. And I've been through various events across Europe and even globally, and I'm always again amazed. And so if you look back upon your life, I don't know how long your life is so far. If you think back and you think maybe even you were a teenager in church, or I don't know when you came to faith and believe in God or not, to see what has been some events which have been really influential in your life, then I would love to see you type it up here in the chat box. Like, what has been like a very significant event, and how old were you? Because that you will remember that particular event. For example, I share with you, I was 10 years old and I became a Christian in the Berlin Stadium by that time, so I'm a bit older, so the wall was still up. And, being there with 30,000 people and worshiping the same God from so many different nations was just something unbelievable. So actually, tomorrow night, I'm meeting one of the speakers who, had been there in Berlin '81, and it had been so hugely impactful on my heart, seeing other Christians from different nations and cultures and colors, all, loving Jesus. That it started something. And this is where I got my, I was drawn to Jesus, but also where I felt I got my calling to serve, youth in Europe. So this event has been so powerful. And through my teenage years and later as a student, I went to some of these conferences back in the Netherlands run by Thema, and they were calling us as a young generation to make a stand and say, are you following Jesus wholeheartedly? How much can faith cost you? And so then these events, these conferences with more than 10,000 people were absolutely amazing. They were burning in my heart, and I heard God in you, sometimes even in a voice I've never heard before, that something like this is possible. And so again, this is where I got my confirmations for my calling. And then later on, when I was, lucky and blessed to actually, do conferences European wide, I just think what an impact these conferences had on my life. And some also I forgot because there were none. I just went there and it was nice, but it had no impact on my spiritual life, for example. Then I just forgot, but some of them are just very vivid in my mind. So if you have a chance of just writing it in the chat box here, look, how old were you, what kind of event do you remember? It might even be a concert or a family weekend away or whatever, and that would be just fascinating to know. And tonight I'm dealing with this topic of how to create an event with impact, and this topic has become very dear to me. Because, nearly for 10 years, I was running 4 European conferences every 2 years. And we had various things we wanted to see achieved. But then we thought, how do we measure any of this? We talk about, we're going to change the world, or we're going to raise a young generation to be, doing something amazing in their nations. But how would we trace it? How would we survey any of this? So just like what is out there, this can be impacting us, and is there any tool out there with what we can actually create more of an impact? And so I was on this journey, and so when I had the chance of doing my master's degree in England at Radcliffe College, and I asked, my professor, could I actually look at events and impact and actually measure my own conference and actually see, what were some of the things within the event which actually helped or fostered the spiritual learning, and maybe some of the stuff maybe which had no impact maybe, and where could I improve. So I had this huge privilege of evaluating my own conferences, and you might imagine I was very nervous, what will come out of me, analyzing my own work and ministry. I mean, this has been quite a scary road, but I loved it. At the same time, I felt like I want to know if something's going wrong and it's so off, how can I do it better? So I was on this journey, and as I found out, and with my master dissertation writing, and I thought, oh boy, there's this hardly anything on the market, and so I thought, like, what is the, how can we learn from businesses maybe? And so I applied to do a PhD on this topic of event impact. I'm still at the very early stages. I'm just in the stage of gathering data, material. I'm talking to various conferences at the moment in Germany, and can I do some more surveys and so on. But this, I was just hooked on this topic, and so you're gonna get some of what I've learned, also maybe where I failed, and I would be very happy to. In the end, if you have questions, type them, and then very happy to address them. And I will make sure that I leave enough time for that. So looking at events, and I looked at, what are the definitions, what are even some of the limitations there. I don't know if you've ever looked into that even more in depth, what is an event, and realizing actually that there is this body here, the UNWTO, which works on this whole business of trying to unify and have like one voice in that, and we call that the meeting industry, or international meetings industry. So everything goes in there, which is like an event, or it could be association or government meetings, corporate incentives, seminar, congresses, conferences, conventions, and so on. So looking at these all, and then they have this unified body. So I thought, already, that's very cool, to say, okay, there is one body like in 157 countries. But then again, I looked into the terminology, and it has been very fascinating again, that you can have the same word, like we use Congress in German, and it has a different meaning in New Zealand or Australia. So that could be a conference, and whatever term you use, look into what it means in your own nation, and see how does that apply. Maybe it's just a techie thing, but I thought interesting. Sometimes you're only allowed to call it a Congress when you had like more than 10 nations being present, or if you had offered some interpretation and so on, so very different things, but all of it is under this kind of umbrella. And so they're trying to help align things even more in the future. And so what are some of the characteristics of an event? And of course, what I will present here tonight is no whole list of something. But I thought, when I looked into it, it could be, from 2 hours, and to 5 days or 10-day event conferences and so on. So it is very different, depends on the situation, on the context, on the needs. But there's always something there which is experience-oriented. It is interactive. There's some parts where you respond to something. There's a production. You create something up on stage somehow, no matter if you have a stage or not. We're somewhere front where things are presented. Maybe you do that, to introduce a special need or an organization. You do some promotion for a company or so on. And it's always scheduled. It doesn't happen automatically, or we just say, okay, let's do an event. There's always some kind of planning involved, which sometimes can be very demanding. Like with my European conferences, I had more than 1.5 years before, and sometimes even before I would even finish one conference, and it was like 2 years after the next one, I would already have booked some speakers just to make sure I get them on board, because I missed them another time because I was too late for them. So these are some of the characteristics of an event, and I'm sure you all are familiar with these. I was just trying to get into the topic here and see, what is out there for us then to learn and take away. And one of the highlights, Sabina might be pleased, this is what I got from some of my Dutch friends at the Navigators, which is called the Left Ministry in the Netherlands, with students. They're absolutely amazing. I think one of the biggest impacts they have in the Netherlands on students and discipleship is just amazing, absolutely amazing. And so we discussed that here, and so I'm going to give that to you, and hopefully it's going to be maybe also helping you to reflect even deeper when you think of your events. But in event management, sort of, we compare elephant and mouse events. And I'm going to explain that to you. But I just think for us to be aware that there are two big types in there, and each of them needs a different approach. So often when we, do big events, I know in the Netherlands they had like these big Pentecostal, gatherings with 30,000 or more, or in the UK, I mean, massive Soul Survivor and other conferences, huge in the summer. It's very complex. You prepare, months or years or whatever to see that accomplished. And then, how it is, 4 or 5 days a week, and then it's over. But you worked like mad for this to happen, for years sometimes, And then, for example, it's a good performance. You want to have a good performance up on stage somehow. If it's a Christian event, there's some kind of stage directing. There's worship. There is some good key speakers, and sometimes even you use a keynote speaker to attract audiences. I don't know, I'm just part of planning a German-wide conference, which we do every decade, and we aim about, for about 20,000. And so we are now in this process, as 22, what do we need now? We want this to be attractive, to say, it is going to draw some crowds, because you need a break-even point. Now, as in that case, it is about 12,000, so you need to do a lot to get that kind of, group to your event. Or it could also be, something in your own nation, something in your own region, or even in your own local surrounding, something where this is large for you. It depends on your context, so you define what is large for you. I every year, so I go to Kosovo and serve the churches there. And when you think of the church, then this very Muslim setting, they have about 1,500 believers in the whole of the nation. So the large gathering there might be, I don't know, 100 or 150 people together. It's like amazing, So it depends very much on your context, but you have some of it, where you pour so much of your heart and life into this, and you want to see this, very, very well done. And then you have, you hope this is the aim, you want youngsters, to be saved, inspired, and the elephant is slow to multiply. And now my screen seems to be frozen. Let me do it again. And then we have the mouse event, which is, more small group oriented. It is about each person in the room. You know each person by name when they enter. It is something, a family kind of spirit. It's all about relationships, and you think, how was your week? You prayed for someone passing their driver's license, and then you follow up on this. It's very personal. And doing a mouse event, in that case, in church or at work or so, it can be very simple. Like on Monday, I did one for my company, because I'm also working in an aluminium company 4 days a week. And so I just did like our Christmas party, and we're always late, so we do it in January. And it was very simple, it was like curling on the ice, and then I booked a restaurant, and then we just walked there and had amazing food, but that was a mouse event. That was very small. It was like 19 of us. It was all about relationship building, and each other by name, and it's very simple. But this is also then a time where you can get, deeper with each other, where you maybe study the Word of God more together, where on a Sunday, maybe, which could be like an elephant in your church, depending how it is, you know, you cannot ask the speaker, you cannot check and say, you know, I've got these questions and so on. So rabbits are very small, and you know, it's a rabbit, not a mouse, even I always do this mistake, but they multiply very, very quickly. So when we look at biology here, you know, a pair of elephants, you know, I mean, fertile 4 times a year, you know, it takes them 22 months, you know, for the baby to grow in the womb, and it takes them even more 18 years until they can recreate. So in 3 years, out of a beautiful pair of elephants, you have, you know, a family grow, you know, from 2 to 3. Beautiful elephant family, but it takes quite a long time, isn't it? It takes 3 years, you know, for that family to develop. And then we have the rabbit, and you know, when you, I don't know if you had rabbits in your garden or not, you know, but practically they're born and they continually could be fertile, you know, there could be 7 babies per pregnancy, and it takes 1 month, you know, and so in 3 years, 2 rabbits, you know, when we compare that to the elephants, multiply rapidly. And if you are sitting in front of your computer, could you give me any guesses what you think mathematically could come out of, you know, a pair of rabbits, you know, after 3 years? How big do you think is the rabbit family? How much has it grown? Any guesses here from the Netherlands or from Poland or from the UK? Any guesses here from your side? How many do you think we will have in rabbits? Any guesses? No one wants to give a guess here? Adding. Okay, you're adding. So I'm gonna. Okay. Are you in a calculator, maybe, Leandra? Okay, so we're here 3 years, 7 rabbits times 4 months. Okay. So this is like real calculation now, but any sort of guesses? Okay, so we're on to 252. Theo, any guesses from your side? I'll give you some time to count here, huh? We've got 4,000 as an estimation here. You want to know the answer? It might be shocking. Might be a pest in some regards, but it's 476 million. You know, it's adding each of them, you know, multiplying again, having 7 babies, and then they have 7 babies. So after 1 month, so it is completely crazy. Exactly, Sabina. Wow, exactly. And so it's just that question, you know, what do we want to achieve? You know, it's one thing, do we want to reach, you know, millions of young ones, you know, what should our events look like? And maybe just go back to that one here. What is that you want to see? And so it's very important to discern, you know, what is your event? What are you planning to achieve? And also, is that something you think you know the need is to go deeper? Then maybe it has to be less paper, you know. Or what I'm struggling with and really working hard on, that at each of my elephant events, I discern what are my rabbit elephants in here, elements in here. What is some of the rabbit elements? So if I do a conference for 3,000 people, or even now we do it for, you know, hoping for 15,000, I look for the rabbit elements in there and say, you know, can we have small groups? Because somehow we want people to go deeper. We don't just want it to be frontal all the time. Could we offer life coaches, that would be, this one-on-one could be a rapid element in there. So trying to look at your events and saying, what kind of impact do I want to see? And then, what are some of the elements we do so that you are even more purposeful than ever before and thinking, what is that we want? And so I looked at impact and tried to see what is out there. And so I looked at the Oxford Dictionary and others, saying, okay, it's a countable or uncountable effect on something or someone to achieve a result in somebody or something, right? Is somehow achieving something in another person or as a result. And so then I created my own definition and saying, impact is a powerful effect that, and I'm now, that something, especially something new, has on a situation or person, which will lead to actions. Because that personally, this is like one of my biggest driving motors. I pour my life into these events. I wanted to have a powerful effect that, that something new or has on a situation or a person, which will lead to action. If I talk in a church setting, I want people to grow. I want them to be looking into getting to love Jesus. So in the end of all my events, I think if I have not reached that goal of us loving Jesus more and understanding his word more, then I wonder if it's worth anything, Like what you're saying, Sabina, here, that for the moment, you're more into the mouse event because you are more of a one-on-one person. So of course that often goes with character, but thinking, like if you want to have the town speak about God, bring into conversations, then you need something more attraction. I realized also that with my elephant events, that they were catalytic. If I try to do them well and aim for some impact here, that could be very catalytic for some rabbit elements coming out of it. So I don't think one or the other is better. For me, often is when they go together. I think it could be a huge effect on people. So I found it really interesting. That's one of the new slides I put in here, and the way we learn. When we talk about impact and what we want people to take away, this is then the way we learn. And it's not just about some of these statistics. If you hear something, you remember such and such percentage, or if you look at something more. It's similar in that regard, but it's about words, the way we learn. And when we go from the top left and then to the top right, because the top left, I don't know what you could imagine, how it affects the brain, but it is near the ear, right? So it is, in that case, it works. It is about hearing of words. So that part of your brain, which, hears words, has some special, area around that, which makes it, perceiving that. Then the one on the right top, so you might imagine where that goes to, is looking. So you're looking at a word. So that part of the brain in the front here, is looking at these words and then can understand, can bring into context. And then if you go down to the left, that part maybe of the brain is maybe harder to know, but it's that speaking part. So it's somewhere behind there. When you actually speak words, it's another part of the brain. And so thinking, how do we use the maximum of our brains to contain message? We need to have all the various elements. I mean, the more you can have, the more visual and audio and all of it that combined, is even better. So then the last one there on the bottom right integrates all the elements, but even more because it is that part of thinking. So most of your brain is actually used when you think about words. So that kind of thinking is when you can actually stir a conversation. So you can create a rabbit element in a very big plenary session, you know, when you say, okay, I want you to talk to your neighbor now about this question, then you turn around and you react, you think about something and you speak it out. That's where the thinking part, you know, happens, and that actually has the most effect on that brain here, because you are working with a material now, and so you can contain and retain that much better. So what does that mean also for the way we teach? You know, the way we do our events. Are we very good at just addressing one part of our brains, or are we trying to, you know, encompass the whole thing? And one of my friends is also an event manager, and for her dissertation she looked at event psychology. And so she gave me this picture and saying, isn't that fascinating? So I said, okay, next time I do an event, I want to see that I use, you know, the full brain capacity in that regard of saying, okay, I want to give an option to people, because we all have different learning styles. We have a preferred learning style, but can we use the brain to the maximum? And I also found it interesting in the event psychology there, then, you know, that actually the hormones you produce in going to an event could be compared to running a marathon. You know, the what is it called? The lucky, we call them lucky hormones in German. You know, the happy hormones. They're actually brought to life because of attending an event. You know, because it gives you that much joy, and your adrenaline is flowing, and so on. So, a fascinating topic. Also, looking into event psychology. So what are different kinds of impact? And I had this huge privilege now for the third year round that ELF had asked me if I would consider running a year-round mentoring with event organizers. And I love it. I think I've got the coolest guys ever. Often also they're the youngest ones and the crazy ones. You know, event organizers, they're fun and you know, creative and so eager to learn from each other, and it's just absolutely beautiful. So if you ever wanted to, you know, think, you know, you want to spend a year on this with some homework and then also meeting up as a team, it has been just absolutely worthwhile. So in there we look even more into the depth of different kinds of impact. So the biggest one, with the most visible one, is the financial impact here, that we measure the return of investment. So it's using the terms from business that we look at, you know, what do we get out of it financially, that we have the return of objectives and the business value of meetings. Let me just drink something here. So this is like the first time that something was written about impact. And financially, if you Google for that, you find a lot of stuff on financial impact, but very little yet on the business value of meetings, like the word value in there, you know, which is like somehow you can't measure values as such. But in financial impact, for example, you look, you know, how much income have you generated? What does it, you know, how does your city profit from your event being there? What if you have like 1,000 people come? You know, you create some income, you know, someone is employed to clean the toilets or whatever, you know, there's some revenue coming. You maybe if you have a big, you know, town hall and is used for events and, musicals and so on, this can improve the economic structure of region. So, you know, released his PhD on financial impact through events. Absolutely fascinating, but so out of my capacity of brain. And then, like, these are the three important things then in there, you know, how to measure. Sorry, I have a bit struggling with my slides a bit. So that you have clearly defined event objectives and expectations. That somehow you have a method of collecting data that you can measure these objectives, and that you hope that you have an evaluation on the results, which you hope is going to, you know, implement for change. And working with these wonderful event organizers across Europe, and I'm mentoring quite a few next to it, not one, and some of them are, you know, are reaching thousands and thousands of, for example, young people in the UK that never had anything in writing. I just think, okay, it's one thing, you know, want to sell it maybe to your board, to church leadership and so on, but make sure that you have something in writing there. And then also saying, you know, how do I collect data? You know, what can you do to then actually measure? Have we reached what we want to see? And then the learning in there, you know, does it lead to any improvement? So this led to a whole new area, which is called the non-economic impact. So there are 3 guys who actually were the first ones in 2010 saying there must be something deeper. There must be some kind of effect, you know, which we see through events, through conferences, through big fairs, which somehow have, you know, something, it does something to us, but is there any way of measuring non-economic impact? And so they said, okay, you know, if you go to a seminar, can you actually look at knowledge expansion? So at the European Leadership Forum, for example, after each seminar you attend, you have to fill in a survey, you know, how was it? And I sometimes think, oh, it's just such a pain, you know, it always takes 5 to 10 minutes or so to do it. But now that I've given, you know, several seminars there as well, I'm looking forward to it. I mean, because I want to know, you know, how, like I had a different, you know, maybe opinion on how I was performing, and someone else, you know, 20 in the room give you a very different picture. Also someone saying, you know, this where she would need to improve and we would love her to be better at it. So education outcomes, it could be for fundraising issues or not, raising awareness or profiling. For example, one of my friends in the US, she did fantastic in events each year for homeless people, and she had like 30,000 homeless people at her weekend. You know, they would provide everything from hairdressers to dentists and so on. But she was like, I don't know how to gather any data, you know. So I worked with her, and I asked one of my friends to help her and say, you know, okay, let's create some surveys. You know, you just go around and interview people. And so you need to have a certain number, you know, to get at least some data and can quantify, you know, it. But, you know, it's just that kind of, you know, gathering data is so important. So actually what I've done, you know, for all my conferences, we always gather data. And what I've done now, even more for the last things, also for the Lausanne movement I work with, like we had a conference in 2016 with about 1,000 younger leaders globally coming together. And I would do a survey before the event, so I could actually check what is their motivation of coming, what are they looking for. You know, we did a lot of stuff beforehand to connect them. So I wanted to see, have they made new friends beforehand, you know? And then I did one straight after, the day they left the compound. And I asked them, you know, how have you profited? You know, any theological insights? You know, have you made even more friends? What are you hoping to implement in the next, you know, 48 hours? And then later, you know, part of your ministry. And so I've done one, you know, a year after, and I've just finished now 2 years after, and I'm now next week finishing that data collection and saying, you know, what has happened out of all of these, you know, have they, you know, implemented what they thought they would? Why haven't they? You know, what are they missing? Do we have to provide more mentors and whatever, you know, could come out of it? What are the needs of younger leaders? And are we, you know, aiming at them or not? So define what is the kind of change you want to see. And so this is the Maslow hierarchy of needs. And that was very important for me when I realized, okay, I want to reach young people. I want them to get a calling for life. But then I first need to see that, you know, their physiological needs, you know, do I provide, you know, some food, and is there water around there? I mean, it was very hot and maybe they were dehydrated, you know, then there were safety and needs there. And then, you know, belonging in love and so on, then esteem. So my event, you know, was more aiming at the, you know, self-fulfillment needs. But to get there, I needed to make sure that the whole package was working. And I can tell you so many errors and mistakes I've done with, you know, with addressing the needs. Because I thought this is fine, you know, they would just be ready to listen. But once, if they haven't slept all night, then, you know, the physiological need wasn't even covered. So why would they be open to listen to the word of God, you know? Or I remember, you know, the Paris attacks. in 2015, 16, they were devastating, I mean, for Paris and so on. But also then they affected my security issues. People didn't feel safe, So how will you make sure that we are safe? There were 3,000 of us, So people pulled out and were scared. And I had to come up with press releases and say, one of my good friends is a police officer and he's going to look after the site and so on. But, we need to make sure that we cover that, at least some of you address these needs, and we find some ways then later to get to the top one where we want them to actually be open to receive God's calling. I mean, sometimes God is gracious and he just overpasses these needs, But in general, yeah, we need to make sure that to have that kind of impact, we need to be aware of this. And then I personally looked at cognitive impact, what also they were talking about the value of meetings, saying, what can come out of people attending your event? What do I want to see? So this is just my personal list, right? From my events. It might be very different to yours. What is that you want to pass on? What is that you want to see achieved? Knowledge or understanding of history, or, I want to see if understanding of Europe has changed. I want them to be burdened for our continent. And then the different ways of doing that. I mean, if you would be very, very smart and diligent and so on, you could even, count how many times have they mentioned the word Europe from the stage, and then could you trace that back? And, is that, has there been a shift? And I did all these sort of questions in my survey afterwards, and I realized there was a growing understanding of the European needs, but it was hard then to trace where did it come from. It might be from different sources. Absolutely fascinating. And then this is where I talk about impact, that it has to lead to action, somehow the spirituality, I mean, is huge. It's absolutely important to me, this dimension, what we want to see. And it's the hardest one to measure, because, how will you measure spirituality? What does it mean that you have grown in your relationship with God? So there could be some stuff in there where you think, okay, if that person has been touched by God, has received some encouragement, and this has been huge at our events, that people have been very encouraged, then it has to lead to that one, to actions, behavioral impact. And interviewing young ones, having come through various events, which I organized, I realized that they were so touched by God and the needs, that it wasn't just necessarily going to Africa, but it was maybe just going next door and serving the homeless, like here engaging with the poor and needy, that actually they became more passionate about their own church and got more involved, or they gave more money to church or to missions or whatever. You need to see the whatever they have experienced before with the cognitive journey, the spiritual journey, then leading to that kind of action. So you have to be very clear in what do you want your event to accomplish. And so there's just this a slide here on maybe helping you, if you haven't done it, or revisit a mission and vision statement for your events, that you say this is what we want to achieve, and then talk with your team about it. Dream together. Is that what we want to see? Be united by it. And as event organizers, future or even today, you lead by that vision and mission statement. It has to be always again up. I put it up in the offices. I let people learn it by heart, in a sense of I want this to be clear, this is what we want to do. So I'm just going to give you some of what we have done in mission when I was the CEO. That it took us nearly 2 years to really look into this, trying to see what our values here and how do they fit into a mission statement here, like Jesus-centered European community, and so making Jesus known in his kingdom. You can read the full thing. And then also looking up for a vision statement. This could be according to SMART goals, to say, okay, what does it mean in 5 years we want to grow from this, or we want to have something across the nations, or we want to have that kind of number from that many countries being involved. There had to be a progression there, and a progress in saying, okay, this is what we want to see happen. And then sometimes you have to go back and have to adjust, or just say, God, we gave our best. it didn't work, but you lead by that vision and mission statement. So these were like, for example, our values, which we, looked like they were crucial to us. So now at the moment I work for a different organization, different events. And so we're just now, again, defining our values and saying, okay, if these values are so important to us, they have to be reflected in program, in logistics, and all of it, that people should inhale this and say, if you're leading a team, try to be prayerful, integrate prayer, be intercultural, and so on. So how can we measure this? I've just talked about the different kind of measurements, different kind of impact. And we could actually add more now that I've now done some more studies on it. I think there's an ecological impact, which we could look into more, but for tonight I don't have so much time, and I want to also leave time for questions. But the ecological impact could be something where you think, okay, if you do an event and you produce all this plastic, would it be wiser to have a washing machine, or how would you recycle stuff? So looking into what could be out there. So we have this, keep it simple, stupid. So set your goals and have them measurable. So this is just the definition of SMART, just to look at, what is it that you want to achieve. And so please, I really plead with you to have things in writing here, so that you look at your outcomes. This is what we want to achieve. And so identify your target group. My target group were the 16 to 30 here in this case, from all the different countries in Europe. And I was burdened by that. I had 53 countries on my list. So I did everything, to get all the countries there. And I failed probably on about 10, but my aim was all of Europe. It wasn't like the richer countries of Europe. So, but that was my, the vision. And then I realized, okay, there are different kinds of target groups within my event. I realized, okay, the participants are the driving motor. It's for them. If the exhibitor complains and saying it's too noisy or whatever, sleeping arrangements and so on, I think, well, sometimes this is what you have to sacrifice, for that, because it is about the participants and we do it for them. And so for each of these target groups, as a team, we worked on, this is what we want to see. So, okay, in that case, we want them to receive teaching. So when I look at all these outcomes, then I linked all these outcomes to program, and saying, okay, what does it mean for non-plenary program, for plenary sessions, maybe for outreach opportunities, that each of them has an opportunity to learn, to worship, maybe to link up with a local national mission network, which meant, maybe we needed to offer something afterwards as outreaches. So to gather resources. So then we had to, of course, provide resources. And then the same we did for the service team, and saying, okay, who is out there? And I realized, actually looking and analyzing who are my most important people, I realized it's actually the service team. They, they can crash the party if they are, unhappy. So treat them really well, do everything to appreciate them, and they're very important in the whole process of running the event. And then we also had outcomes for exhibitors. We thought, like, if they're already part of it, in our case, we had something like 400 to 500 exhibitors, and often they were young ones, being sent to these events. I wanted them to be impacted as well and to get something out of it. And sometimes even though they came as exhibitors and you think, oh, they got it all together, actually it was lots of them were actually being called and touched by God to go and take next steps. So in that, looking at impact and looking at the different target groups, and there are different ways of trying to analyze stuff. Maybe some of you know the balanced scorecard is one way of measuring. I actually have, I haven't used that one as much, but I've done a big stakeholder analysis and looking at, who is out there, looking at these 4 things. How does that affect us? And learning and growth, where does that happen? So some tools to practically use are, for example, the surveys I mentioned, or an evaluation feedback. You could also do that in cohorts, interviews, polls. There's amazing ways today, even online, where you just even do it within the session, where you have pods where people can just go online. Or you could have group discussions and say, what is your takeaway here? So looking at this, that you can have some quantitative data, which is, about masses. And I want to encourage you to do surveys in this regard, to do some evaluation online. With SurveyMonkey, you have 10 questions free, then the other, is a bit, more expensive. Or with Google Forms, you can easily these days, create surveys, and I use them a lot. And it's, if you can get, like in marketing and business, if you get 2 to 5% feedback on surveys, this is pretty good. I've actually now been able to get even 90% sometimes, which is like amazing. And I knew it wasn't because of me sending a great survey. It was because of the process. And we walked the journey with these younger leaders, for example. But if you can get at least 30 to 40%, you're doing amazing. So just to encourage you to do that. Or the qualitative, then, interview some of these participants. And then, look at the effectiveness, that you can, again, are there some interviews, you can do group discussions and so on, and just encourage you to do that. And I would also be happy to know what you do in seeing, is that, does it work for you? Also, then looking at the efficiency and which again comes into the return of investment. This is where that you then can see, have you made enough money? Were you able to break even or not? So what insights do you want to gain from the survey? So this is again the question. Once you've defined your outcomes, you want to go back to your outcomes and ask questions around that. And you might have 2 different surveys. Like I had 3 different surveys because I had 3 different target groups, and not everything was applicable to everyone. And so then, of course, there are closed questions you can use, and where you provide them different answers. I always think it's important to know why have they come, what is their motivation of coming. I've just done one for Willow Creek, Germany, over 12,000 leaders. And it was fascinating because I thought, there's a trend, which I perceive in Europe, that often it's no longer anymore about the one top speaker, but often it's about atmosphere. Who of my friends is going? Can we do it together as a whole youth group? And often these are might be speakers well known in their countries, but because it's Europe, or so they wouldn't be known, in our context. And then when I did the survey then for Willow Creek, they found out that no one of the participants really cared about any of these speakers. They just trusted the brand. They said, whatever Willow Creek here in Germany provides, it works. So amazing, that because none of us had really heard of these speakers. So maybe that takes a bit of the pressure out of here. And then I'll ask them, what has been good or not, what needs to be improved. And then I give them rankings, you could have less or different or keep, improve. You could work with numbers if you wanted. And if it works in your context and you can use 1 language or 2 languages, then also have open-ended questions, which makes it always a bit harder to judge, where here you can get amazing stories also out of it then for fundraising and for marketing and so on. So encourage you. Here was another one someone did, by SurveyMonkey, and you could rank, how would you recommend that event to a friend or not? What did you like or not? So you make yourself vulnerable, but also people appreciate you being authentic about it, and you're not just playing, or making it up, how good your event was or not, because often you might have a very different gut feeling than the participant might have. And then even, this is what one of my friends did here in northern Germany, because she had no email addresses. People just turned up for her event. So I said, okay, how can we even start collecting data? So we just created this postcard here. And then you could just say, okay, this is how I like the worship, or whatever, the painting, or, I rank the plenary sessions as such, or the atmosphere, the catering, and so on. And then on the other side, you were able then to, put down your name and email address, and through that, like 400 cards out of, 1,500. So that was huge. So for the next marketing, when you have email address, they're like gold, treat them as treasures, and then you can actually then go back and invite them to the next event. Or you might have seen that, on the toilet many times, rate the service today. So I was looking with one of my friends who does amazing stuff in the UK, but these teenagers would never fill in anything, surveys is just a pain for them. So I said, could we have something similar, something more fun, where they can actually just press a button, and say this is what they liked, or even do that online polling, as I had mentioned before. But, try to be creative, how you can actually use that. And so some of the lessons here, as I'm finishing off my part here, and I would love to listen from you, your experiences, maybe questions or disagreements. What I put down here, that I realized I needed clear objectives. Now I have it in writing, but it took me probably 2 or 3 years, and always again adjusting and seeing how does it fit. Also looking at the whole thing, I forgot completely, and I've only found this out in my surveys and later, that there's an emotional impact, which I did not consider, because I was so, focused on mind, that I completely forgot the heart thing in there. When people actually, in the open questions, said, I felt, my heart jumped, the atmosphere was amazing, I picked up, oh wow, there are a lot of emotional cues, and we need to work with that too. Also, that I'm much more purposeful today, that, integrating a rabbit into the elephant. So I do lots of elephant stuff, and I really, every time I check, is it really worth the time and the resources and my efforts, but I always think, what are some of the rabbit elements in here that we can implement? Also saying, in the end, for me, it is about loving Jesus and running the race well. So have I, with my events, helped the generation to love Jesus and run the race well? So what are some of the discipleship elements? So we became much more conscious here, and also we shaped according to this, then also the schedule of the day. We completely changed some of the order, and then I became also much more focused on what are some of the direct next steps we offer after an event. One of my friends in the UK, but he said that when I met him at a Norwegian conference, he said, if you offer an event and you have nothing in place within the first 72 hours, you are home, don't do any event. Because people become Christians, at your camp, for example, and then you go back home and you have 3 more weeks of summer breaks. What happens to that young person and its faith? Probably is going to turn against God and just say, oh, it was just an emotional hype, So what is that you offer directly afterwards? At Willow Creek, Germany, we asked them, what is the one thing you're going to implement? And I'm just working on that a year after. What is the one thing you said you would implement? Have you done it? And so we try to remind people of their own promises, even to God.